15th Hub. Note: this 15th Hub was written by a Nurju to complete in the future the 30s for the elderly and as a source for its composition, since the period of the Risale-i Nur's writing had come to an end 3 years previously. One time, when I was in compulsory residence in Emirda, in what was virtually solitary confinement, I became wearied of life due to the torments they inflicted on me with their surveillance and arbitrary treatment, which I found hard to bear, and I regretted having been released from prison. I longed for Denizli prison with all my spirit and wanted to enter the grave. But while thinking prison and the grave are preferable to such a life, and deciding to enter one or the other, divine grace came to my assistance. It bestowed on the students of the Madrasatul Zahra, whose pens were like duplicating machines, one of the machines which had just appeared. All at once, 500 copies each of the valuable collections of the Risale-i Nur appeared from a single pen. Their presaging new victories made me love that distressing life and caused me to offer unending thanks. A while later, unable to endure the Risale-i Nur's victories, its coward enemies prompted the government to act against us. Again, life became difficult for me. Then, suddenly Dominical grace was manifested. The officials connected with the case, who were those most in need of the Risale-i Nur, studied the confiscated copies in the course of their duties most curiously and carefully, and its treatises gave their hearts a sense of bias towards it. As they began to appreciate it rather than criticize it, the Risale-i Nur's circle of study greatly expanded. It produced profits 100 times greater than our material losses, reducing to nothing our anxiety and distress. Then, secret, hostile dissemblers directed the government's attention towards my person. They recalled my former political activities. They aroused suspicions about me in both the judiciary and the education authorities and the police and the Home Affairs Office. They spread at the hand of the different parties and the incitement of concealed communist anarchists. They started to pressure us and arrest us and confiscate the parts of the Risale-i Nur that fell into their hands. The activities of the Risale-i Nur students came to a standstill. A number of officials made false accusations which no one at all could believe. They tried to spread around the most extraordinary slander, but they could make no one believe it. Then they arrested me during the coldest days of winter on some trite pretext and put me into solitary confinement in prison in a large and extremely cold ward, leaving me 2 days without a stove. I was accustomed to light my stove several times a day in my small room and always had live coals in the brazier, so with my illness and weakness I could endure it only with difficulty. While struggling in this situation, suffering from both a fever and the cold and dreadful distress and anger, a truth unfolded in my heart through divine grace. It uttered the following warning to my spirit. You called prison the Madrasa Yusufiya, the school of the Prophet Joseph, and while in Denizli, things like relief 1,000 times greater than your distress, and spiritual profit, and the other prisoners benefiting from the Risale-i Nur and its widespread triumphs, all made you offer endless thanks instead of complaining. They made each hour of your imprisonment and hardship the equivalent of 10 hours worship, and made those passing hours eternal. God willing, the calamity-stricken in this third school of Joseph, benefiting from the Risale-i Nur and finding consolation, will heed this cold, severe distress of yours and transform it into joy. If the people you are angry at are being deceived and are ill-treating you without realizing it, they are not worth being angry at. And if they are tormenting you and causing you suffering knowingly, out of spite, and on account of misguidance, they will in a short time enter the solitary confinement of the grave due to the eternal execution of death, to suffer everlasting torment and torture. Their oppression is earning for you both merit and spiritual pleasures, and is making transcend ours eternal, and is allowing you to perform scholarly and religious duties with sincerity. With all my strength I exclaimed, "All praise be to God." Out of humanity, I pitied those tyrants and prayed, "O my sustainer, reform them." As I wrote in my statement to the Minister of Internal Affairs, in this new incident the truly guilty are those tyrants who in 10 respects act unlawfully in the name of the law. They found extraordinary pretexts showing to anyone fair-minded with their slanders and fabrications, which would have made those who heard them laugh and lovers of the truth weep, that they can find no way to attack the Risale-i Nur and its students in respect of the law and right, so deviate into lunacy. For instance, the officials who spied on us for a month could find nothing incriminating, so they wrote out a memorandum saying, "Said's servants bought raki from a shop and took it to him." They could find no one to sign the memo, but finally arrested a drunken stranger and got him to sign it under threat. Even he said, "God forgive us. Who would sign this extraordinary lie?" So they were compelled to tear it up. A second example. Someone I did not know and still do not know led his horse so that I could go out for a ride. I used to go out most days for a couple of hours in the summer for my illness and to take some air. I had given my word that I would give the owner of the horse and Faden books for 50 liras, so as not to break my rule and become indebted to him. Could any harm come of such a thing? But then both the governor and the court officials and the police questioned us 50 times about the horse's owner, as though it were some important political event affecting public security. One person even said loyally that the horse was his, and another that the Faden was his, in order to put a stop to this meaningless questioning, and they were both arrested together with me. We watched numerous childish escapades like these two examples and laughed till we cried. And we understood that those who attack the Risale-i Nur and its students make fools of themselves. An amusing incident from among those examples. The reason given on the paper authorizing my arrest was disturbing public order. Not having seen the document, I told the public prosecutor, "I slandered you last night." I said to a police officer who was questioning me for the police chief, "If I haven't served this country's public security as much as 1,000 public prosecutors and 1,000 police chiefs 3 times, may God damn me." Just at that point, when in those freezing conditions I was in most need of rest and not catching cold and not thinking of the world, I was overcome with anger and vexation at those who had sent me into this intolerable exile, isolation, imprisonment, and oppression in a way that spelled out their hatred and ill intentions. Divine grace came to my assistance, and the following was imparted to my heart. Divine determining, which is pure justice, has a large part in the wrongful oppression which these people are inflicting on you. You have food to eat in this prison, that sustenance of yours called you here. It should be met with contentment and resignation. Dominical wisdom and mercy have a large part, which is to illuminate those in this prison and console them and to gain your reward. This share should be met with endless thanks and patience. Your soul has a part in it due to its faults which you did not know about. In the face of this, you should tell your soul by repenting and seeking forgiveness that it deserved this blow. Some of your secret enemies have a part in it with their intrigues and deceiving certain ingenious and suspicious officials and inciting them to such oppression. In the face of this share, the terrible immaterial blows dealt by the Risale-i Nur on those dissemblers have avenged you completely. That is enough for them. The final part is the officials who were the actual means. In the face of this share, it is an act of magnanimity to forgive them in accordance with the rule, Those who suppress their anger and forgive people, verily God loves those who do good. For whether they wanted to or not, they may have benefited from the Risale-i Nur in respect of belief, although they looked at with the intention of criticizing it. I felt such happiness and gratitude at this veracious warning that I decided to commit some harmless offense and incur a prison sentence so that I might remain in this new school of Joseph and perhaps even help those who were opposed to me. For someone like me who was 75 years old, without attachments, and only 5 out of the 70 people he loved in this world remained alive, the grave was 100 times preferable to this prison. For 70,000 copies of the treatises of the Risale-i Nur were in free circulation and would perform my duties connected with the Risale-i Nur, and I had brothers and heirs who would continue to serve belief with thousands of tongues in place of my one tongue. This prison too was 100 times more comfortable and more beneficial than the unfree liberty outside subject to that tyranny and oppression. For in place of having to suffer all alone outside the arbitrary treatments of hundreds of officials in prison, together with hundreds of other prisoners, one only has to suffer the slight arbitrariness of 1 or 2 people like the prison governor and chief warder, which will yield benefits. And in the face of this, one receives the brotherly kindness and consolation of many fellow prisoners. With the thought that the compassion of Islam and human nature are shown as kindness to the elderly in such a position, thus turning the hardship of prison into mercy, I became resigned to prison. At the time I attended this third trial, because of my difficulty in remaining on my feet due to weakness, old age, and illness, I sat on a chair outside the door of the court. The judge suddenly appeared and angrily asked in insulting manner, "Why isn't he waiting on his feet?" I was angry at this unkindness in the face of my old age. Then I looked and saw that a large number of Muslims had gathered around us and were watching in most kind and brotherly fashion and not dispersing. I was suddenly warned of the following 2 truths. The first, the coward enemies of myself and the Risale-i Nur had deceived certain ingenious officials with the intention of putting a stop to the Risale-i Nur's conquests by destroying the public's good opinion of me, which in any event I did not want, and of destroying my character in the people's view. They had prompted those officials to act contemptuously towards me in that way. See these 100 people in place of that one man's insults. In return for the Risale-i Nur's service to belief as a divine favor, they are kindly offering their sympathy by appreciating your service and both welcoming you and seeing you off. Even while I was in the examining magistrate's office on the second day of the trial answering the public prosecutor's questions, around 1,000 people gathered in the country yards opposite the court windows and showed their concern. They appeared to be telling them through the tone of disposition not to pressurize us. The police could not make them disperse. It was imparted to my heart that in this dangerous age these people want a true solace, an inextinguishable light, powerful belief, and certain good news about eternal happiness, and that they search for this by nature. They must have heard that what they are searching for is to be found in the Risale-i Nur, so that they show my unimportant person much more attention than I deserve, because I have performed some small services for belief. Second truth, I was reminded that in return for the ill treatments a few contemptuous, deceived individuals inflicted on us with the intention of insulting us and destroying public regard for us, due to their unfounded suspicions of our disturbing public order, was the applause and appreciation of innumerable people of reality and forthcoming generations. Yes, through the strength of certain affirmative belief, in every part of this country the Risale-i Nur and its students held the awesome corruption and efforts of anarchy to destroy public order under the veil of communism. They worked to maintain public order and security so that these 20 years, 3 or 4 related courts and the police of 10 provinces have not been able to find or record any incidents involving the infringements of public order connected with the Risale-i Nur students, who are very numerous and found in every part of the country. And the fair-minded police of 3 provinces stated, the Risale-i Nur students are moral police. They assist us in preserving public order. Through a certain affirmative belief, they live in everyone's head who reads the Risale-i Nur something that restrains them from committing misdemeanors. They work to maintain public order. An example of this was Denizli prison. When the Risale-i Nur entered there and Fruits of Belief was written for the prisoners, within a space of 3 or 4 months, more than 200 of those prisoners became so extraordinarily obedient and acquired such religious and righteous conduct that a man who had murdered 3 or 4 people refrained from killing bedbugs even. They became completely compassionate, harmless members of the nation. The officials were astonished at the situation and looked on in appreciation. Some youths even said, before receiving their sentences, if the Nurjus remain in prison, we shall try to have ourselves convicted so that we can be taught by them and become like them. We shall reform ourselves through their instruction. So, those who accuse the Risale-i Nur students, who are thus of disturbing public order, are surely seriously deceived, or have been fooled, or knowingly or unknowingly are deceiving the government on account of anarchy and try to crush and repress us. We say this to them. Since death is not to be killed, and the grave is not to be closed, and the travelers in this guest house of the world, convoy after convoy enter the earth with great speed and adieu and vanish, for sure we shall part from one another very soon. You shall receive the penalty for your journey in awful fashion. At the very least, you shall mount the gallows of death and eternal extinction, which form the discharge papers of the oppressed people of belief. The fleeting pleasures you have received in this world, imagining them to be everlasting, will be transformed into everlasting, grievous pains. Regretfully, our secret dissembling enemies sometimes attach the name of Sufism to the reality of Islam, which has been gained and preserved through the swords and blood of the 100 million martyrs at the rank of saints and heroic war veterans of this religious nation. While the way of Sufism is only a single ray of that sun, they show it to be the sun and deceive certain lax government officials. Calling their Risale-i Nur students Sufis and members of a political society because they worked effectively for the truths of the Qur'an and belief, they want to incite them against us. We say to them, and to those who listen to them against us, what we told the just court at Denizli. Let us too be sacrificed for the sacred truth for which hundreds of millions of people have been sacrificed. Even if you set fire to the world around us, we who sacrifice ourselves for the truths of the Qur'an will not lay down our arms before atheism. We shall not abandon our sacred duty, God willing. Thanks to the sacred solace arising from belief and the Qur'an for the pains and despair at the adventures of my old age, I would not exchange this most distressing year of my old age for 10 of the happiest years of my youth, especially since for those who repent and perform the obligatory prayers, each hour in prison is the equivalent of 10 hours worship, and with respect to merit, each transcendent day spent in illness and under oppression gains 10 days of perpetual life. I thus understood from those warnings just how deserving of thanks are these days for someone like me awaiting his turn at the door of the grave. I exclaimed, "Endless thanks be to my sustainer," and was happy at my old age and pleased with my imprisonment. For life does not stop, it passes swiftly. If it passes in pleasure and happiness, since the passing of pleasure is pain, it becomes transcends, passing without thanks, and in heedlessness, living since in the place of pleasures, it departs. Whereas, if it passes in prison and hardship, since the passing of pain is a sort of pleasure, and since it is considered to be a sort of worship, it becomes perpetual in one respect, and through its good fruits gains everlasting life. It becomes atonement for the mistakes that were the cause of past sins and imprisonments, and purifies them. From this point of view, the prisoners who perform the compulsory parts of the obligatory prayers should offer thanks in patience. 16th Hub. One time in my old age, I was released from Eskişehir prison after serving a year's sentence. They exiled me to Kastamonu, where I stayed for 2 or 3 months as a guest in the police station. It may be understood how much torment someone like me suffered in a place like that, who was a recluse, wearied by seeing even his loyal friends, and could not endure the changes in dress. While suffering this despair, divine grace suddenly came to the assistance of my old age. The inspector and police in the police station became like firm friends. They not once warned me about not wearing a peaked cap, and like my servants, used to take me for trips around the town. Then I took up residence in Kastamonu's Risale-i Nur Medrese opposite the police station and started to write further parts of the Risale-i Nur. Heroic Risale-i Nur students like Feyzi, Emin, Hilmi, Sadık, Nazif, and Salahaddin attended the medrese in order to duplicate the treatises and disseminate them. We held scholarly debates even more brilliant than those I had held in my youth with my old students. Then our hidden enemies aroused the suspicions of some officials and some egotistical hojas and sheikhs concerning us. They caused us and Risale-i Nur students from 5 or 6 provinces to be gathered together in the school of Joseph of Denizli prison. The details of this 16th hub are described clearly in the brief letters I sent secretly to my brothers while in Denizli prison, in those sent from Kastamonu, and in the collection containing the court defense speeches. So, referring the details to those letters and to my defense speech, I shall allude to it only very briefly here. I hid the confidential and important collections, and particularly those about the Sufyan and the Risale-i Nur's wonder working, under the coal and firewood so that they might be published after my death or after the authorities had come to their senses and listened to the truth. Then, when feeling easy at this, some detectives and the assistant public prosecutor suddenly raided my house. They pulled out those secrets and important treatises from under the wood, then arrested me and sent me to Sparta prison, although I was in bad health. While greatly upset and sad at the harm that had come to the Risale-i Nur, divine grace came to our aid. The authorities carefully and curiously began to read those important treatises which had been hidden, of which they were in much need, and the government offices became like Risale-i Nur study centers. Although they began to read with the idea of criticizing, they appreciated them. In Denizli even, although we were unaware of it, numerous people read the printed edition of Ayatul Kübra, the Supreme Sign, officially and unofficially, and strengthened their belief. This reduced to nothing the calamity of prison we were suffering. Later, they took us to Denizli prison and put me into solitary confinement in a stinking, cold, damp ward. I was most unhappy at my old age and illness and the difficulties visited on my friends because of me. I was feeling most distressed at the confiscations of the Risale-i Nur and the cessation in its activities when divine grace suddenly came to my aid. It transformed that huge prison into a Risale-i Nur Medrese, proving it was a school of Joseph. The Risale-i Nur started to spread through the diamond pens of the heroes of the Medresetü Zehra. The great hero of the Risale-i Nur, even in those severe conditions, wrote out more than 20 copies of the Fruits of Belief and the Defense Speeches collection in the space of 3 or 4 months. The conquests began both within the prison and outside. It transformed our losses in that calamity into significant gains and our distress into joy. It once again showed the meaning of the verse. But it is possible that you dislike a thing which is good for you. Then we were subject to severe criticisms because of the incorrect and superficial statements of the first experts' committee and the education minister's savage attacks. A statement was published against us. Then, just when according to some reports they were even trying to secure the execution of some of us, divine grace came to our assistance. Chiefly, while expecting a severely critical report from the experts' committee in Ankara, they sent a commendatory one. And although they found less than 10 errors in 5 chests of copies of the Risale-i Nur, we proved in court that the points they had shown to be errors were completely correct, and that they themselves had been in error in the matters they said were wrong. We showed between 5 and 10 errors and mistakes in their 5-page report. And while awaiting severe reprisals in the face of the fruits of belief and defenses collection, which we had sent to 7 government offices, and the entire Risale-i Nur which had been sent to the Ministry of Justice, and especially in return for the effective, stinging slaps dealt by the confidential treatises, they responded extremely leniently, and like the even consoling letter sent to us by the Prime Minister, they were most conciliatory and did not attack us. This proved decisively that as a miracle of divine grace, the truths of the Risale-i Nur had defeated them, making them study its treatises as though it were a guide. It made those broad circles into a sort of study circle and saved the belief of numerous hesitating and bewildered people, causing us spiritual joy and profit far exceeding our distress. Then our hidden enemies poisoned me, and the late Hafiz Ali, the martyr hero of the Risale-i Nur, went to hospital instead of me, traveled to the intermediate realm in my place, and made us weep despairingly. Before this calamity, on many occasions, I had insisted on the mountain at Kastamonu, "My brothers, don't give meat to the horse and grass to the lion." That is to say, don't give all the treatises to everyone, lest they use them to attack us. Although Hafiz Ali, may God have mercy on him, was around 7 days away on foot, as though he heard with his spiritual telephone, that same time he was writing to me, "Yes, Ustad, it is a wonder of the Risale-i Nur that horses should not be given meat, nor lions grass. Rather, since horses should be given hay and lions meat, he gave that lion-like Hoja the treatise on sincerity." I received his letter 7 days later. We worked it out, and at the same time I was shooting it out on the mountain, he was writing these strange words in his letter. Thus, just at the time that hero of the Risale-i Nur died, and we were being pressurized by the secret dissemblers who were trying to have us punished through their intrigues against us, and we were anxious that I would be sent to hospital on official orders because I was ill from poison, divine grace came to our assistance. Thanks to the sincere prayers of my blessed brothers, the danger to my life from the poison passed, and according to powerful signs, our martyr was occupied in his grave with the Risale-i Nur, and replied with the Risale-i Nur to the questioning angels, and the Denizli hero, Hasan Feyzi, may God have mercy on him, who would work according to Hafiz Ali's system, and his friends were secretly serving the Risale-i Nur effectively, and because the other prisoners were being reformed by the Risale-i Nur, even our enemies supported our being released from prison, and like the companions of the cave, the Risale-i Nur students turned that place of ordeal into an ascetics cave of olden times. All this, together with their endeavors in writing out and disseminating the Risale-i Nur with easy hearts, proved that divine grace had come to our aid. It also occurred to my heart that since a great interpreter of the law like Imam Azam suffered imprisonment, and a supreme mujahid like Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal was severely tortured in prison for the sake of a single matter of the Qur'an, and endured it in perfect patience, yet not remain silent about the matter in question, and numerous religious leaders and scholars were completely patient and unshaken, offering thanks despite suffering torments far greater than yours. For sure, you are obliged to offer endless thanks for the very few difficulties you suffer, although the reward you receive is great for those many truths of the Qur'an. Yes, I shall describe briefly a manifestation of divine grace in the midst of man's wrongful tyranny. When I was 20 years old, I used to say repeatedly, "Towards the end of my life, I shall withdraw from the life of society into a cave or onto a mountain like the people of olden times who abandoned the world and withdrew into caves." Then, when in the Great War I was being held as a prisoner in the northeast, I took this decision: after this, I shall spend my life in caves. I shall slip away from political and social life. Enough now of mixing in them. At that point, both dominical grace and the justice of divine determining were manifested. It transformed the caves I had imagined into prisons, places of seclusion, loneliness in places of ordeal, and solitary confinement in a way far better than my decision and wish, compassionately for my old age. It bestowed on me schools of Joseph and places of solitary confinement where my time would not be wasted, that were far superior to the mountain caves of ascetics and recluses. It gave both the benefits pertaining to the hereafter of the cave and strenuous service of the truths of belief and the Qur'an. I had even determined to show myself guilty of some crime and remain in prison after my friends had been released. Solitaries like Husrev and Feyzi would have remained with me, and on some pretext I would have remained in the solitary confinement ward so as not to meet with people and waste my time on unnecessary conversation and egotistical artificiality. But then divine determining and our fate sent us to another place of ordeal. Out of compassion for my old age, and in order to make us work harder in the service of belief, duties were given us outside our will and power in this third school of Joseph, in accordance with the verse. But it is possible that you dislike a thing which is good for you, and the saying, "Good lies in what God chooses." Yes, there are three instances of wisdom and important benefits in respect of the service of the Risale-i Nur in divine grace, turning, out of compassion for my old age, the caves of my youth, when I had no powerful, hidden enemies, into the solitary confinement of prison. First instance of wisdom and benefit. It is only in the school of Joseph that the Risale-i Nur students can gather together without harm. Outside it is expensive and causes suspicion if they meet together. Some who came to visit me would spend 40 or 50 liras, then see me for only 20 minutes or not at all, and would have to return. I would have willingly chosen the hardship of prison to be closer to some of my brothers. This means that for us prison is a bounty, an instance of mercy. Second instance of wisdom and benefit. The service to belief at this time through the Risale-i Nur has to be through advertising it everywhere and attracting the attention of those in need. Attention is drawn to the Risale-i Nur by our imprisonment. It is like an advertisement. The most stubborn or most needy find it and save their belief. Their obduracy is broken and they are saved from danger, and the Risale-i Nur's study circle is widened. Third instance of wisdom and benefit. The Risale-i Nur students who are sent to prison learn from one another's conduct, qualities, sincerity, and self-sacrifice, and they no longer seek worldly benefits in their service. Yes, since in the school of Joseph they have seen with their own eyes the 10 and perhaps 100 benefits gained for every hardship and difficulty, and the good results, and the extensive and sincere service to belief, they are successful in attaining pure sincerity and no longer lower themselves by seeking minor personal benefits. A subtle but sad yet at the same time agreeable, points concerning these places of ordeal that concerns myself only is this. I observe the same situation here that I saw in the old madrasas in my native region in my youth. For, traditionally, in the eastern provinces, some of the madrasa students' needs were met from outside, and in some madrasas, their food was cooked in the madrasa. There were other ways they resembled this place of ordeal. As I watch the prison here, I feel a pleasurable regret and longing, and travel in my imagination to those enjoyable times of youth and forget the difficulties of old age. The addendum to the 26th flash. This is the 21st letter which, having been included in Mektubat letters, has not been added here. The 27th flash. This consists of the defense speeches from the Eskişehir trials, which have been published in the hand-duplicated editions of the Flashes collection and in part inside Nursi's biography.